All right. Let's call to order the Sparks City Council special meeting for Tuesday, September 5th with a roll call.
Mayor Lawson.
Here.
Council members Abbott.
Here.
Vanderwell. Here. Anderson.
Here.
Bybee.
Here.
Dare.
Here.
City Attorney Duncan. Here. Acting City Manager Martini.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Bybee, will you lead us?
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We'll move to public comment. Miss Andrea Pelto, followed by Tom Duncan. Done? Done, sorry.
Good afternoon, City Council, Assistant City Manager, and Attorney Duncan. So I come before you today. My name is Andrea Pelto, and today I'm acting as a retired Spark City employee. So I would like to encourage you to go ahead and vote to terminate the contract, because the people that I've worked with for 29 years have told me stories that, are just very upsetting. And, I feel like, it needs to come out what has been happening to the employees to the city of Sparks. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Tom Dunn.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. For the record, my name is Tom Dunn, proudly representing the men and women of the Reno Airport and Sparks Firefighters Association. A few short months ago, we stood in this chamber and recognized that you had a tough decision to make regarding the settlement of a former fire chief, that fear and intimidation were not benchmarks of a successful organization, and that the roadblock to progress needed to be removed. Today, your decision is an easy one. It is our professional opinion that Mr. Crute should be terminated for cause within the terms of his employment agreement for the actions, and I quote, which would tend to derogate public confidence in the government of the city of Sparks should the manager remain in the position, and breaking points 3, 4, 9, and 11, and 12 at a minimum of the ICMA rules or code of ethics. Regardless of the vote today, we encourage this council to provide a copy of the investigation and any violations of policy, ethics, ordinance, or statute to the public for transparency, accountability, and to foster democratic principles between the city of Sparks and its residents. While preparing for the meeting today, I was reviewing the City of Sparks website and came across this statement from the biography of Mr. Crute. Quote, his personal beliefs are capped with two mantras: to always be truthful and to treat people how you should be treated. I don't think we would be here today if that were true. We are hopeful that with your vote today that any future city manager will not discredit, intimidate, or silence city employees. And for those managers and department heads that remain after today, you have a decision to make. Are you going to step up and move the city forward, or continue on with the questionable management practices of a former city manager? Make no mistake, the employees, their families, the residents, and community are watching. Thank you for your time.
Good, thank you. All right, I have no more comment cards. Anyone in the public wishing to speak at this time? Okay, we'll call it and bring it back to the dais. I'm looking for an approval of the agenda. Mr. Anderson.
I move to approve the agenda hearing with 7.1 before 6.1.
Okay. Got a motion, Ms. Vanderwell.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Aye.
Thank you, Christopher. Let it be known, Christopher Dare voted aye. Motion carries unanimously. All right, 7.1, public hearing, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is public hearing, consideration, discussion, and possible action to retain Pisanelli Bice as a special counsel to represent the city of Sparks concerning the potential termination of city manager Neil Crute at a rate of $500 an hour, not to exceed a total billing of $5,500.
Okay. Brandon,
Mr. Mayor,
Members of City Council, Brandon Sendall, Senior Assistant City Attorney for the record. As you've all been briefed, we are asking for council approval of this professional services agreement with the law firm Pisanelli Bice because the City Attorney's Office has identified a conflict. We represent Mr. Kreutz in pre-existing ongoing litigation and believe that it would be a conflict of interest to advise whether it's the council, the mayor, other staff members regarding any potential termination. That's why this is presented here before you. I will note it's for a relatively low, not to exceed amount, sort of intended to be a stopgap. If continued representation were necessary beyond that, we would be looking for action, whether it's from you, Mr. Mayor, or from council requesting either extension of this agreement or a different agreement with a different law firm. But that would be a decision for another time.
Okay. Questions from the council? If not, I'm looking for a motion. No public hearing, thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. Now I'm looking for a motion. Ms. Bybee.
I move to direct the city attorney's office to to retain Pisanelli Bice as special counsel to advise and represent the city's interests regarding the potential termination of city manager Kreutz at a rate of $500 an hour and not to exceed a total billing of $5,500.
Mr. Abbott.
I'll second that.
I got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Aye.
Let the record show that Christopher Dale voted aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, 6.1, consideration, discussion, and possible termination of the employment agreement AC 5553 between City of Sparks and City Manager Neil Kreutz. Ms. Valdez.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. Jill Valdez, Human Resources Director for the record. We're here today because on August 25th, 2003, the mayor requested a special meeting to consider the termination of City Manager Neil Kreutz. The city manager was noticed of this meeting on August 28th, 2023. With the termination, the council may consider the city manager's character, alleged misconduct, competence, and physical or mental health. In order to do that, the council may consider the city manager's performance, job description, job duties, and any other matters properly related thereto. Under the contract, the options before you today are termination without cause, termination with cause, or no termination. If you were to terminate without cause, you would need to give the city manager a 90-day notice, and that would include 1 year of severance pay, plus paying the benefits such as group health insurance and any normal contractual payouts. If you consider termination with cause, that would require a motion which should include the cause, and that would include basic payouts that are eligible upon termination of the contract, such as leave accruals. The contract does define cause, and the contractual definition includes, but is not exclusive to, a breach of contract, violation of the City of Sparks resolution, ordinance, violation of any county, state, or federal constitution, charter, ordinance, statute, or regulation, a commission of any act of dishonesty, a misappropriation or failure to account for public funds, an act of moral turpitude, an act which would derogate public confidence in the government of the City of Sparks should the manager remain in his position, or otherwise neglect of duties. If you choose no termination, you may make an affirmative action or no vote. If you are seeking termination, remember that the city manager and his representative need to be given an opportunity to present written evidence, provide testimony, call witnesses relating to his character, alleged misconduct, professional competence, or physical or mental health. Termination would require 4 out of 5 council members without the mayor vote, or the mayor and 3 council members. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the council? Mr. Dare, you have any questions?
No questions here.
Thank you. Okay, with that then,
It's not showing, but I'd like to speak.
yes, Mr. Anderson. Yeah, comment.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to read a statement here.
Go ahead.
I propose that we terminate the city manager for cause using the following section, Section 7D. Termination for cause includes but not limited to: 1, breach of any provision of this agreement; 2, violation of any city council resolution ordinance; 3, violation of any county, state, or federal constitution, charter, ordinance, statute, or regulation, except minor traffic or parking violations; 4, commission of any act of dishonesty or commission of any act of moral turpitude, or any act which would tend to derogate public confidence in government of the city of Sparks, should the manager remain in the position. 6, a neglect of duties, including but not limited to excessive absences, failure to exercise the care, skill, and diligence of a reasonably prudent executive responsible for administering public programs and safeguarding public funds. The points I'd like to make under Section 7D is Mr. Kreutz's handling of the fire chief without properly consulting the city council, human resources, or legal counsel constitutes a neglect of duties and a failure to exercise the care, skill, and diligence of a reasonably prudent executive. Any reasonable, prudent executive administering a public program would have known to consult counsel, human resources, or legal before engaging in a high-profile employment action of a city employee. Number 2, Mr. Kreutz's decision to post an unauthorized online video about the firing of the fire chief has embroiled the city in expensive litigation with potential exposure to the city. Mr. Kreutz's decision constitutes neglect of duties and failure to exercise the care, skill, and diligence of a reasonably prudent executive. Any reasonable, prudent executive administering a public program would have or should have known not to post a video about an employment decision to open the city to litigation and potential liability. Number 3, both the manner of which Mr. Kreutz terminated the fire chief and his online public statements are actions which would tend to derogate public confidence in the government of the city of Sparks under Section 7D. Excuse me. Number 4, Mr. Kreutz has created an uncomfortable working environment through intimidation and culture of fear. In doing so, he has decreased the productivity and service of the city employees. Therefore, he has neglected his duties and failed to exercise the care, skill, and diligence of a reasonably prudent executive. Number 5, manner in which Mr. Kreutz had dealt with the city employees and his lack of leadership style tends to derogate public confidence in the government of the city of Sparks under Section 7D. The next point is Section 1A under duties. As the chief executive officer employer, the manager shall faithfully perform the duties as prescribed on the job description as set forth in employer's charter and or ordinances. This agreement, and as may be lawfully assigned by the city, and shall comply with all lawful governing body directives, state and federal law, city policies and rules, and ordinances that may exist or may hereinafter be amended. Under this item, number 1, Mr. Kreutz's handling of the fire chief without properly consulting the city council, human resources, or legal counsel failed to comply with city policies, rules, and governing body directives under Section 1A. Number 2, Mr. Kreutz posting of the unauthorized online video, which was prompted litigation and embarrassment, failed to comply with the city policies, rules, and governing body directives under Section 1A. The next one, Section 13B. City council, individually and collectively, shall use their best efforts to refer in a timely manner substantive criticisms, complaints, and suggestions called to their attention to the manager for study and/or appropriate action. And for these reasons, number 1, in accordance with Section 13B, each council member previously expressed performance problems to Mr. Kreutz in individual meetings. Number 2, since that time, Mr. Kreutz has not improved on those individual actions. His performance has not improved as previously represented and expected. Number 3, all of these actions have happened in open and have been observed firsthand by council members. Number 4, without revealing the contents of the communications, the council members have communicated with outside legal counsel and in good faith belief that these actions constitute cause under existing law and legal precedents. And therefore, I suggest that we as a council take action today in earnest and good faith belief that this would be in the best interest of the city of Sparks and for all the citizens and employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else have a comment?
I do.
Mr. Dare?
Yes, I'd like to share that when the option of terminating the city manager's contract without cause came before me the first time, I voted against it because I do believe it's important there's a process that allows us to look in the actions of city manager and a deeper level, have the city manager have a chance, or any employee, to take the direction of the council to see those areas fixed and make sure that they listen to our concerns. During the last month, as I committed, I've had the opportunity to take a deeper look into many areas of the city and watch and see if the city manager made the changes being asked. One of those was his word that he would work to repair his relationship with other city council and help make our city function at its best. In my opinion, there are areas of concern for our city at large, and Mr. Kreutz did not follow through with the commitments he made to me regarding a diligent focus on mending fences with all city council. This brings us today where I believe the city manager's contract should be terminated with cause. I value each employee that works for the city of Sparks and want what is best for our city and our community. I have read somewhere, and I know that at times when there's a change of choice of a decision, that there might be confusion, or think that there's some confusion with us. There's no confusion at all. My first vote, and I believe that of how we functioned on our first vote, had to do with giving this a process. We've walked through the process, and after doing so, I will make this vote now. I will make this known that I believe that we will hold accountable each person for their actions, including Mr. Kreutz. I do want to say I'm sorry I cannot be there. It was my grandbaby's first birthday, and this all came quite sudden. So I'm on my way home, but I wanted to take the time to make sure that my voice was heard, and I'm representing the best I can the people who live in my ward and our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. With that, then, we'll call Mr. Kreutz or his counsel up.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is John Gallagher. I represent Neil and Liz Kreutz. Present with me are Neil and Liz in the audience, and my partner, Pat Gallagher. I've got to start off by saying to you, each of you, I'm astounded by the comments I just heard. We're in receipt of a notice that for this meeting that did not delineate any cause. You've failed in complying with the open meeting requirements of the meeting to give Mr. Kreutz the ability to call witnesses to respond to the evidence. Mr. Anderson's announcement just now was the very first time we've heard of what the basis of an asserted cause assertion for termination of Mr. Kreutz was. We've never received it. It amounts to blindsiding him and violating his due process and his contractual rights. He has rights under the contract where you're obligated to give him notice, which you didn't do. And I want to make that very clear. How you decide to proceed knowing that you've violated his due process rights and the rights of the citizens of the state of Nevada regarding the open meeting law is up to you and your council. Before I start, I want to give you a little bit of background on Neil Kreutz and his history, because I think some of this is lost. This seems to now be more of a lynch mob mentality, where the conclusion of his termination has been already preordained, which again is a violation of due process. You're obligated to act in accordance with the City of Sparks' ethical requirements of the council. And that's consideration of fairness, integrity, honesty, impartiality. That's not what we've heard just now. You've already made your decision, and your decision is based upon, Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, absolute outright mischaracterizations of the fact of the loss in litigation. We have documentary evidence. Mr. Kreutz was instructed in the process to deal with the loss and resignation. I believe you were fully aware of that, but yet you said that he didn't consult counsel and he didn't seek HR involvement in the case, which is not true. It is not true. The facts will come out, whether it's in the loss and litigation or at some time in the future. But those facts, Mr. Kreutz acted as a good public servant and followed the instructions he was provided. To suggest otherwise publicly is impugning his integrity, his character, and is a false statement to the voters of the City of Sparks. These firefighters and police people and the voters deserve the truth. They deserve the truth. So, it's up to you. If you want to tell the public the truth, tell the public the truth. Seek your advice of counsel and do it. But it will come out, whether it's in a courtroom or now. Neil has had a distinguished career here. He doesn't deserve this treatment. He's been with the city for over 26 years. In the initial phase of in May, when his agenda, the consideration, the termination of his agenda was considered, he met with each of you prior to that, solicited your input on how he could improve his performance. Mayor, you were present during those meetings. Several of you refused to engage. Others told him he was doing an excellent job. Just keep doing what you're doing, Neil. Here we are now, a few short months later. He was given no objective performance criteria. After that initial May agenda, the mayor went back and met with each of you without Neil and asked for specific criteria where Neil could improve his performance. During that meeting, some of you engaged, others refused. Wouldn't give him performance, even though under his contract, you're required to engage with him, to timely refer any concerns you have, but you're required to deal with him fairly and in good faith. And you're required to deal with him and evaluate him also in good faith. The law requires it, your contract requires it. Instead of doing that, when you gave evaluations for this year, well, last year, Neil had a combined evaluation for cumulatively from you in excess of 4.3 as I recall. This year, depending upon how you consider it and count it, the evaluations, and we have now individual ones, we didn't from 22 because they weren't on the website, but the 23 evaluations are significant. Ms. Bybee gave him a rating of 0. Ms. Vanderwell gave him a rating of 0. The cumulative 6 categories or 7 categories in the evaluation forms, he didn't score anything in any category, 0 in every one of them. And that is under the good faith obligation that you all have in treating him fairly, impartially, and in good faith, under his contract and also under the law. 0. Ms. Bybee gave him a combined 1.8. Again, with those same standards applied. 2 zeros, 2 ones. When you consider all of those numbers together, even considering Mr. Abbott's rating, which was low. Mr. Abbott's rating was under 3, as I recall. His combined rating was still just under 3, which was acceptable under your own performance standards. If we throw out Ms. Vanderwell's 0, he's over 3. In the May meeting, it was discussed whether there was cause to terminate. I believe it was Mr. Dare on the record says, no, there's no cause. Now here we are, and there's cause. But none of the cause is based on anything that occurred between May and now. Now what's happened is that we've gone through this deal where we're going to open an investigation, an investigation into an employee, and we're going to solicit complaints about the employee. We're going to ignore our own HR processes. We're going to engage in ad hoc rulemaking where we're going to create rules that apply only to Neil. And that's supposedly a discharge of your obligations of fairness and impartiality and honesty that are embodied in the Sparks Municipal Code that each of you are required to abide by. Now, ultimately, you tabled the idea that you were going to have the investigation into Neil, and at least to our knowledge, you didn't solicit complaints, although you publicly invited them. To our knowledge today, none were received. And even the statements that we've heard are vague assertions of what Neil's management was or anything else. But remember, if we go back to since May, right before the meetings, the meeting on his agenda for his evaluation, and then subsequently afterwards, each of you were engaged to provide substantive feedback and constructive criticism for his improvement. 2 of you refused to engage. And during that time, 1 of you refused to address it, but then publicly went to the press and made misstatements regarding the Lawson litigation as the basis for criticizing Neil, knowing full well that Neil acted on instructions. And so here we are today, repeating the same untruths in an effort to conjure up and contrive a reason to terminate a man that served the city of Sparks for 26 years. 26 years. He gave his life to the city of Sparks, and this is how he's treated. So, there's a lot of questions that arise. You've got, in Nevada, the covenant of good faith and fair dealing applies to every contract. So not only do you have the contractual provisions that are stated in your contract, where you're required to meet with him, you're required to provide him constructive feedback, you're required to engage with him, and you're required to report any deficiencies to him. You've done none of them. You've done none of them. That constitutes a breach of his contract. And when you breach the contract, you can't enforce it. As you sit here today, not only because of the open meeting violation, you don't have a basis to terminate this contract because you're in violation of it. And it's a fundamental principle that the one who breaches the contract can't then seek to enforce it. What you're doing is you're selectively choosing to enforce certain provisions that benefit you, and you're ignoring the ones that you're obligated by. You're not complying by the contract at all. And when it comes to be, each of you will be held accountable for specific direction that you gave Neil or feedback that you gave Neil. And you're going to be held accountable for the specifics regarding the Lawson litigation. And fortunately, in this scenario, Neil's instructions in the Lawson matter are written. They're written. And there's no dispute what they say. And there's also no dispute that he followed those instructions. So, you're talking now about making sure that Neil is held accountable. You people need to be held accountable for honesty, fairness, and impartiality as the Sparks Code requires. It governs all of you. So be honest with these voters. These voters, Sparks voters, are intelligent people. Whether they hear it now or they hear it in the future, they're going to know what the truth is. The truth is going to come out. So there's a number of questions that come to being. If you had cause in May, why did Mr. Dare say on the record that there was no cause? None of the things that you mentioned happened between May and now. Now, these are contrived issues, so you can deprive a guy that worked for 26 years for you of his pay. In July, when you have the investigation, we're going to create an investigation where we're going to seek people or former employees or who knows what, members of the public to criticize and complain about Neil so we can conjure up cause. Well, I hate to tell you, if you don't know that you have cause in May, why did you need an investigator to tell you have cause? You should be the first ones to know you had cause. And you didn't have cause in May, and you don't have cause now. The idea that you would stand behind an evaluation of Neil and be able to sit behind the dais and suggest that evaluation on his performance of 0 in 7 categories is a discharge of your obligations of honesty, integrity, fairness, and impartiality is outrageous. You should be ashamed of yourselves. He works hard every day for you. He's committed. You even said it in your in some of the other evaluations at how committed Neil was to his position as city manager. Yet amongst the group of you, one of you gives a rating of 0, one of you gives a rating of 1.2. And you're going to be held accountable that that is a legitimate valuation. And then you turn that around and you try to use that as a basis to terminate his contract. That smacks of bad faith. And it certainly doesn't discharge your obligation to deal with him fairly and impartially. And it doesn't show in any way, shape, or form that you've complied with your obligations under the contract to report deficiencies to him. You know, the statements that you made, Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, there's no evidence that anybody was reporting to him deficiencies or that he needed to perform and give him objective criteria. The context was, it's a personality thing, that he is simply not going to turn it around, and his job is suffering because of it. You gave him excellent ratings. As I recall, you gave him a 3.87 in May. What happened between then and now? Certainly nothing you mentioned. You've disregarded your own HR policies with the so-called investigation you're going to do. City employees have a right, in fact, and you have an obligation to protect them with their HR policies. Yet you all undertook this idea that you're going to create this investigation in the public and you're going to hire an investigator to basically try to come up with a reason for you to terminate it. So that apparently went by the wayside. We understood it was because you had instructed your city attorney to reach out to us and negotiate a settlement to buy out Neil's contract. That was in July. Again, we dealt with the city attorney's office in good faith. During those discussions, we repeatedly asked the city attorney whether there were votes in place to approve the settlement that we were negotiating. He told us absolutely, repeatedly. As recently as 2 days prior to the date of the hearing on the settlement agreement that we reached, we exchanged drafts of a public announcement approving the settlement agreement. City Attorney Office had always represented to us that this was something that the City Council would consider and approve, that the votes were in place. We all know that wasn't true. And the question, of course, arises is whether it was ever true or that was just some sort of an effort to manipulate Neil and try to make him look bad in the public. So immediately afterward, that meeting where you're supposed to consider the negotiated settlement, there's not any discussion on the record. There's not any discussion about the contract. It comes in here and it's a preordained deal. And as a member of the public, not only just Neil's lawyer, but as a member of the public, it smacks of an open meeting violation. That there was some funny business, but what you didn't do was you didn't negotiate in good faith. And if the truth was that it was a 5-0 vote, why did you waste the city attorney's time and our time negotiating a resolution? That's a breach of the public trust. It's a breach of the confidence of the public. And it makes all of you look as though you're not dealing honestly with anyone. So again, here we are back. He served this community for 26 years. There's not one tangible thing that you've mentioned that would give rise to a cause termination under that agreement. There's no neglected duties. He hasn't violated the statute. There's no basis for you to seek termination. You certainly haven't given him notice of it in your notice to suggest that there is a basis or that you really even have any intention of giving him the due process to address those questions before you today. It's all a preordained deal, and all you're doing is not being truthful with your voters, and you're spawning litigation. Be honest with them and tell them what this is going to cost you. That you're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with these fancy Las Vegas lawyers at $500 an hour, and what you're going to pay to defend the litigation because you contrived this deal and you didn't deal fairly with Neil. Be honest with them. Tell them. So I'll finish with where I started. Impartiality, honesty, fairness, and good faith. Those are your obligations, your obligations under the Sparks Muni Code. And the good faith basis is your obligation under the law. You've got a contract with Neil. You're obligated to uphold that contract. You violated it with this proceeding today. There's not a basis for you to suggest that you have the authority to terminate him today. And you owed him better. If he had performance deficiencies, you had an obligation to notify him of performance deficiencies and tell him what those were and give him objective performance criteria to meet. That's what the covenant of good faith and fair dealing requires you to do. There's no evidence that said you did that. When he asked for feedback, one of you refused to engage. Absolutely refused to engage. Told him he needed to resign or retire. She had no interest in talking about his future. Is that a good faith basis? And is it a good faith basis to give him zero evaluation on 7 categories without any substantive comments? That's what the city of Sparks gets to defend in public, in those actions, in saying that discharges their obligations to deal and treat this employee in accordance with the law, the HR codes, and their obligations of good faith and fair dealing. By any measure, Neil served the city well. We can go to your evaluations, just Mr. Anderson, Mr. DeHere, Mayor Lawson, in May. Even Mr. Abbott, your evaluations of Neil did not warrant termination in May. I mean, by an objective standard, they were meet expectations under your own matrix. And now here we are. The city and Neil deserve better. The city of Sparks deserves better. They deserve you as stewards of the city to deal with your employees, all of your employees, not just Neil, fairly, honestly, impartially, and in good faith. You've breached those duties. You've breached the contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the council? Not, I'm looking for a motion. This is not an open meeting, what?
So I actually would like to just say a couple things. One, I agreed with Mr. Gallagher on a couple things. One, I did give him a good review in May. And that's what made this that much more difficult, to make this decision that we need to go a different direction. And likewise, with everything that we just heard in my statement, we have reason for cause for that. The second thing is, I agree, we need to be honest and transparent. And with that being said, there was a comment that I made in that meeting on whether or not to retain Mr. Kreutz at that point. I spoke of having been told that day about our delegates speaking highly of Mr. Kreutz from a local businessman's point of view. He said that that was the case. When I followed up after the meeting, I'm come to find out that was not true. So I'm embarrassed to say that I did not research it before that meeting, and when I said that they were all in support of Mr. Kreutz and thankful, I want to apologize to the public for misstating that, or I said it without researching it. So with that being said, I am ready to go ahead and read a motion into place if you'd like, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Spivey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a lot said then, and I really took offense at a lot of it because I've been on this council 9 years, and anyone who knows me and knows me well knows that I do things in good faith, with honesty to a fault. My integrity, my honesty, integrity, and values, sometimes I feel get in the way of trying to really do what is right, and I feel what we are looking at is right for the city and is in the interest of our employees and of the city as a whole. It's not an easy decision to make. I also took issue with the fact that I thought, I've been told for 9 years, our HR evaluations of the city manager were confidential, and that the composite score from all of us was always reported in a public meeting, but that our individual names were not put on, given to the city manager or to anyone else. And not only to see that they're here with the attorneys and they're giving individual scores, those are supposed to be confidential. And I have a problem with that. Whether HR violated, whether I misunderstood the confidentiality of that. I knew that it was a public meeting, but my name has never, in 9 years, been put on any comments that came before our open meeting, and I think I have a problem with that. Did you wish to respond, Ms. Valdez?
Yes, please. The agenda items normally don't list the names. However, when we start our meetings, since I've been doing this and my predecessor have said that it is potentially discoverable information. So those are, there's not a guarantee of confidentiality.
So if there's a request, a legal request, you have to present that?
Yes.
Okay. But I think just overall, I don't appreciate my character and the character of my colleagues being attacked today. I think we have a reputation of doing a really good job here in Sparks and doing what we hope is best and what's right for our residents and our city, and most of all for our employees. And like I said, this is a tough decision. I'm not going to go into any more details what Mr. Anderson read, and even in May, I was one of the 3 votes to remove Mr. Kreutz at that time, and we didn't get to, the vote did not pass, but at that time, for myself, the whole handling of the issue with our fire chief from start to finish was grounds for me in the private sector, and I stated this to Mr. Kreutz. In the private sector, you would lose your job. You could not do from start to finish what happened in that situation, and that was really, for me, the cause that in my mind damaged the city, put us up for litigation, our reputation. It really was, for me, the primary cause for me, and I'm only speaking for myself. That's pretty much all I want to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anyone else? Donald?
I'll just keep it short and sweet. I'll agree with everything Councilman Anderson said today. And if I was going to just summarize one thing, is the last line that he read. The city council is taking action today in an earnest and good faith belief that it is in the best interest of the city of Sparks and all of its citizens and employees to terminate Mr. Neil Kreutz today with cause.
Vanderwell.
I'm going to say that I fully agree with everything that Mr. Anderson, Councilman Anderson, put on the record.
Okay. Mr. Dare, do you have anything?
I have nothing more to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, I know you're writing a motion as we speak.
Mr. Mayor, yes, we're going to need to take
Okay, we're going to
a
take a
recess.
5-minute recess. Back to order. And with that, I'm looking for a motion. Mr. Anderson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to terminate the contract of employment of City of Sparks manager under AC 5553 as amended between City of Sparks, City Manager Neil Kreutz with cause for reasons and testimony of council members today, including but not limited to violations of Section 1A, 13B, and 7D.
Okay. Looking for a second.
I second that.
Let the record show Councilman Dare seconded the motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Aye.
Let the record show that Councilman Dare voted in the affirmative. Motion carries unanimously. Okay. All right, public comments. Mr. Tom Dunn.
Once again, Mr. Mayor and members of council, for the record, Tom Dunn, representing your firefighters. We thank you today for the moral courage to remove Mr. Kreutz from office and look forward to a collaborative and transparent process to find the next city manager that this community, its residents, and business deserve. A leopard never changes its spots, and we are familiar with the jungle that we are currently operating in. We would not be surprised if the former city manager files lawsuits or complaints based on the vote today, as past behavior is a predictor of future behavior. We encourage you not to throw good money after bad, and the former manager should not receive any future public dollars beyond what is within his current agreement. I would also like to suggest that the city modernize its ethics policies and ordinances as well. Finally, we have a message for all city employees, retirees, and their families. We see you, we hear you, and we have your back. We encourage you to voice what you know and what you have been going through. Change won't occur if you stay silent. Stay strong and stay united. We are here. We are not afraid. We are not going anywhere. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. And announcements from the city council and mayor. Anybody? Nothing?
John,
Pardon me?
Assistant City Manager, Acting City Manager.
I didn't hear you.
Oh, okay. I didn't know John had anything.
Okay. All right, with that, we're adjourned.